Our guest today is Joe Murphy. Joe is an expert speaker, author, coach, and facilitator. As former senior executive, he has extensive experience working with Fortune 50 and Fortune 1000 companies. Joe is an author of 6 books on leadership, achievement, and growth mindset. He runs the Leadership Academy, an online series of leadership and management sessions designed to help shape future leaders. So, Joe, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you and all your followers.
I appreciate you being here. So I first came across your content about 2 years ago on LinkedIn and have been engaging with your post ever since. And I learned a lot and found a lot of value in it. And they genuinely helped me in terms of me becoming a slightly better leader. But more importantly, last year, I had the honor of reviewing your book, Climbing the Leadership Summit. And that was an awesome, quick read. So I have so many things to discuss with you today. But let's start with knowing Joe a little bit more. So can you share more about your transition from corporate roles to becoming a leadership coach and consultant, and what inspired you to launch CrossX Current?
It's a great question, and I appreciate the opportunity to explain. Hopefully, I won't go into too much detail. It started off when I was much younger, before the internet. I was struggling in business. I graduated college and I was struggling in business, and I got promoted to manager, and I didn't know what management was in reality. So I wound up trying to get people to be more like me and do the same things as I was doing to be successful. And I was finding out that didn't work. And I'll go into this in a little bit more detail, but my boss wound up quitting, and he put me in charge of about an 80-person operation at the age of 27. And I had 3 people come into my office, 3 grown men who were so old, they were in their 40s. I'm being a little bit facetious, but back then when you're in your 20s, everybody over 40, you figure out they have their life together. And they sat in my office. And my boss had given me the corner office, said, this is important that you take the corner office because it's going to signify that you're in charge. And as the 3 of them said, you've got to change. You've got to be able to get more sales because we don't want to be laid off. It was a bad economy. Companies and corporations were laying people off, not in the hundreds, but the tens of thousands at a time. And that really woke me up, those 3 grown men who I looked up to. And it scared me. And I left the office early and I went down to the library to see the answers. Now, I've been to the library before, but I never researched books on business. And it was scary to me because I knew I was in charge of everybody's livelihood. In other words, if they got laid off, they wouldn't be able to pay for their children's going to college. And that's when I realized the awesome responsibility of being a manager. And I ran across a video program by Brian Tracy, and I happened to pop it in the cassette. This was a cassettes at the time. It wasn't DVDs. And it was Pathways to Personal Progress. And that videotape I still use in my facilitating classes for young people. And they're like, wow, this is such great material. And it's over 40 years old. And once I started understanding what Brian Tracy was saying in that video, and one of the things that I picked up, and I said, what the heck, I'll put it into practice. He said, read an hour a day in your field. And because in 3 years, you'll become an expert. In 5 years, you'll become nationally renowned. And in 7, according to the study at USC, California, you'll be internationally recognized. Just 1 hour a day. And so I started saying, what the heck? I started getting up an hour earlier and read an hour a day. And I got so excited because it wasn't like college. I was doing it for myself, and I was reading books written by experts. And I think that's the key. People who have been on the front line getting things done. And I started accumulating all this knowledge. So you can imagine 1 hour a day. I got so excited. I started two hours a day, every day, never missed a day, even when I had the flu or was sick. And it just turned my whole life around. It gave me a prosperity consciousness, an abundance mindset, and I started attracting like-minded people into my orbit. I started giving speeches. I wasn't a good speech maker. I wasn't good at presentations. And I started learning all these things because I started implementing these ideas. And when the pandemic came about 4 years ago, and nobody knew I did this, by the way, in the corporate world. I was a corporate vice president. And we had everybody going home, And if you remember, everybody was scared. And somebody came to me and said, "Can you teach leadership classes?" Now, they did not know I was studying leadership classes for the past 30 years, every day for 2 hours a day. I didn't tell anybody. And the way the world works, or the universe, it makes a connection. I believe in this. You attract, the law of attraction, whatever you want to call it. But the universe brings things together, and the opportunity arose, and I started teaching leadership classes to an organization that's about 45,000 people. And I was getting a lot of people on these calls. But the main intention was not necessarily to teach them, although it was a sub thing, but to give them comfort, because everybody was going home and everybody was scared. So the byproduct of trying to make everybody feel comfortable became they started learning things. And they said, "Hey, after the pandemic, we would like for you," or when people start going back to work, "would you still do these classes?" And I found so much enjoyment out of giving what I know to people who don't know, because I didn't know. You can become, and this is something that I believe in, you can become anything you want to become. If you're willing to put in the effort, the time, the energy, get the information, and develop the skills, you can do anything. And that is one of the things I teach in my classes. It's a philosophy of mine. But rewinding the tape, back when I was running this office and I started reading, other things started happening. We started winning clients, more business. Instead of laying people off, we started hiring people. So that reading on leadership and empowering my team, because I was managing them instead of leading them back 30 years ago, they took off as well. And those individuals, I had 5 direct salespeople, but I was responsible for a bunch of programmers
Yeah.
and technology people in the office, because I worked in a very large technology company. Those people developed their own businesses, or they've gone on to be executives at other firms. And I think that's also something that I take great pride in, the people that I've worked with in the past. Now, my career took off and I started getting promoted. I became a vice president. I was also a managing director of a consulting firm. I became a senior vice president. And I started doing turnaround operations. And I did 3 different turnaround operations, and they were very difficult to do. And I did that, and I learned so much about what drives a business and how to fix things so that they don't go off course. But remember, it all started with 3 people coming to my office, and I didn't know what to do. And I went and I started reading, or I saw this video program. By the way, and I walk around today when I jog or when I walk, I still listen to these audio programs on my phone. That was a long answer. I hope it wasn't too long.
It wasn't long, and I think that there's so many powerful nuggets of information you dropped in there, and it's such an inspirational kind of journey you had. And I kind of dedicate my whole career of professional growth to reading books, the habit I built about 10 years ago. Before that, I never used to read books, but my professional growth is because of reading books. So yeah, cannot
So you can relate.
I can
Yes.
completely relate. So I was at some point
Yes.
like yourself, not just 1 or 2 hours, I was going even beyond an audiobook. Amazon Audible came about, so I was just listening to a lot of the books and things like that.
Yes. Yes. I have a do it to yourself program. Reading for 2 hours each morning before work. And then when I'm exercising or I'm in the car, listening instead of listening to the radio, which is sort of mindless, or as Brian Tracy called it, chewing gum for the mind. I listen to audio programs and audiobooks, and also I watch videos. Now you have YouTube, but I've got over 150 different videos on success, team building, leadership, management, and negotiations, and other aspects, how to motivate or inspire people, that I use in my classes now that I'm facilitating classes and training people and teaching people all these different skill sets to becoming a better manager and leader.
Brilliant. And I just want to say that I love the you can do anything philosophy. It's a mindset that one should have if they want to succeed. But before I move on to a leadership related question, could you elaborate more about turnaround operations and what are those?
Sure, I started getting noticed, I guess, on LinkedIn. On LinkedIn at the time, instead of it being one of these platforms where people are putting information, it was a recruiting platform, and to many it still is. And so I got recruited by a number of different companies to take a look at building a business, helping building an outsourcing business, and I got involved in helping build that, going offshore to India, is onshore offshore type work. And then I got recruited away after that to go turn around a business, and I became a senior vice president at business that was struggling, one of their divisions. And so when I took that over, I did a turnaround operation there. And that wound up also, that turnaround, we wound up incubating several different consulting practices that were brand new, and we were entering into the market, which helped build that. So in other words, when I came in, what you have to do is a number of things. One, you identify who the people are. Most people leave, though, and this is something that's critical, and I don't know how deep you want to go. Most good people leave before the turnaround starts. They're not going to.
Yeah, please elaborate on that.
They're not going to stick around. So when you come in, you're left with the mediocre people, and that sounds bad, or the people who have not been fired yet. They're still busy keeping the lights on. But then you have a mindset challenge because they're like, no hopers. Well, we already tried that. We already tried this. What are you going to do? And so you've got to identify what the problem is from the market standpoint, why nobody's buying. Then you got to look at the products or the services and how they're being marketed and whether you can actually deliver them. At the same time, you're looking at people who can do the work. And at the same time, you've got to hire backfill new people that can get you from A to B or A to X, whatever that X is. And at the same time, be profitable. So you've got a tremendous amount of pressure, and it's a 7-day-a-week job. So when people come in to build a division, you've got to identify who the keepers are, who your go-to people are, and what the transition period is, and how much room do you have with the CEO to make that transition. But it's not an easy thing. So when you read these in books, I had to do a turnaround operation. There's a whole formula, and you don't even know what's coming at you at the same time because you have customers out there who are complaining that they're not getting service, that the product is not meeting their standards, and you're still trying to change the business, if that makes sense.
It does. And going back to leadership, and you in your answer, you mentioned X factor a little bit. So you often speak about leadership at all levels, right? And you also highlight that people are the X factor, the difference makers. So what does creating leaders at all level means?
Well, that is a term that I picked up years ago. It's about creating leaders at every level because a lot of managers and leaders believe that they need to be that one focal point. They need to be in charge. When in reality, if you're a leader, you want people to be who are underneath you or who report to you to let them be in charge. You want to make sure that they have the tools, the resources, the knowledge and skills to be able to perform, but more than that, to step up and lead their people and cascade that same philosophy down to their people. So it starts as a pyramid, if you will, and it keeps on going down. I call it an inverted pyramid. Instead of looking like this, it looks like this, and you're empowering your people all the way through. But empowering your people means also making sure that they're aligned to the goals of the organization. I have this discussion a lot on LinkedIn. A lot of people write a lot of fluffy things about empowering people. But just like those three men came into my office 30 years ago and sat in front of my desk in the corner office, and I thought I had it made. I was in the corner office. It's a very awesome task to make sure that people have jobs. And to make sure people have jobs, you have to win business. You have to get results. And very few people talk about getting results, growing the top line, revenue line, so that you can be profitable at the bottom line. So the only way you're going to do that is creating leaders at all levels. And they understand this philosophy. We got to grow the business. get profitable, and at the same time, you've got to grow your people, develop your people, make sure that they're not, I don't like the term accountable because it sounds like you're putting the thumb on the scale and forcing them. I like the term empowering, but also that they feel a sense of responsibility and ownership. I'll give you a story. I see people walking past down the hall, and there's a crooked picture along the hall. Now I'm looking at the crooked picture, and I've been I'm watching people walk down the hall, and people don't notice it. And I go to somebody in the office. I say that picture's been crooked for the past 2 days. I've been here. Why doesn't somebody straighten it out? The person says, "Oh, that's been crooked like that for the past 2 years." I said, "Okay, there's a telltale sign." So when I teach this idea of philosophy of responsibility or empowerment, there's three types of people. There's the people who walk past it and they feel like they're not empowered to do it, to fix it. They're the people who walk past it and tell somebody else, like I just did, to find out, hey, that picture's crooked. Why is nobody fixing the picture? And they go tell everybody else about it. And then there's the person who walks past it and takes 2 seconds and straightens it out. That third person feels ownership. They feel a sense of pride and they feel empowered to make that change, to fix something that's in their control. And so those three types of people, the first ones are the ones that either they're being micromanaged or by managers who don't give them the empower, or they don't feel this sense of ownership and they're only punching a clock from 8 to 5 every day. Does that make sense?
It does, and I can't think of the name of the book, but it reminded me of a book which was around like that's how we do it here. I don't remember which book it's from, for the name. I kind of relate that story to that novel or book. Moving on to AI, everyone is talking about it. We can't skip it, and we are living in the age of AI, and it is already impacting pretty much every aspect of our life. And I often hear you discuss about different types of mindset, right? You just mentioned abundance mindset. There's another growth mindset. So how is having growth mindset or abundance mindset particularly important in the age of this rapid technological evolution, and in general, how having growth mindset is important?
So Carol Dweck out of Stanford, Dr. Carol Dweck, she's a professor doctorate out of Stanford. She wrote a book about back in 2011 called Mindset.
Okay.
And it started this change called growth mindset, fixed mindset. But if you look back, you go on the internet and Google her name and put her name in the Google bar, but also put PDF behind it, you'll find some of her other earlier works that she did. And it started off with understanding children and why some children were excited about taking tests and why some children were not excited about taking tests. And she found or discovered that the people with a fixed mindset believed that their intelligence was fixed. And I want to put this background because I think so many people at work believe that they have this idea that their intelligence, what they were born with, has been fixed over time and they can't change it. Whereas on the other side is this growth mindset, those people who say, I can try it, and if I fail, it's okay. Now, she also found that later on, this applies to adults. For example, in Silicon Valley, they give an award out every year in Silicon Valley for the best failure. And it's sort of a joke, but they talk about the lessons learned. And she gives that example, but she also talks about another company. She doesn't say the name, but I think I know what the company is. They were hiring the smartest people out of college. But the problem that this big tech company, and it's a very big tech company, was having is that these very smart, intelligent people who scored 4.0s all through college were not taking chances. They were not stepping up and risking themselves. And what the leaders found was that the people who were not taking chances were afraid that they were going to hurt or tarnish their image that they worked so hard to develop to show everybody they were smart. because they didn't know how to do this other thing and they didn't want to risk tarnishing that image. Whereas the people who maybe didn't score straight A's were willing to go out there and try something and fail, dust themselves off when they fall, and get back up and apply what they learned to see if they can do it again. And that goes back to what Carol Dweck found in terms of children. In one of my classes, I teach growth mindset. I facilitated one off of LinkedIn back in July last year, and it was a free seminar. I had about 120 people show up, and one of the critical things that I saw was this, is that when I showed people this science behind it, I had people who were raising children, and which one woman said, "Oh my gosh," at the end of the program, she was in tears. She said, I've been raising my child wrong. She went on to tell people, she said, my daughter was making straight A's in middle school. But when she got to high school, she was making C's and she was very frustrated. But I kept on telling my daughter she was smart. She was brilliant. She could do it, saying all those positive things. But I realized, this is her words, I realized I was telling her fixed mindset type things after the seminar that you just held, Joe. Now I need to go back to her and say, do you remember all the things you were doing in grade school or middle school? You had study groups. You studied from 4 o'clock to 6. You also had, you used the Khan Academy to learn. So you had set up a structure. She had set up a structure, and that's why she was getting straight A's. But she forgot to put that structure in place in high school, and she just thought she was smart. And she was, but she forgot the structure to support her. And that's the growth mindset aspect. Does that make sense?
That makes a lot of sense. And I have a 2-year-old daughter, so this advice is going to come in very handy to me.
Well, yes. Well, my daughter's now 25. She's a nurse. She was failing math. And I used to put these index cards together, and I would drive her to school. I'm a genius. But then behind I'm a genius, after she read the card, it would say, I put in place time to study. Next index card. I work hard on understanding my multiplication tables. What wound up happening, we reprogrammed her mind. When she was failing math in middle school, she wound up getting A's in college in math. And now she loves math. She hated math, loved math, because when you're good at something, and this is going to apply to work, when you're good at something, you love it. You love it because you're good at it. And you hate it, you dislike it because you're not good at it. And that's going to come back to finding your purpose at work if we have that discussion. This is a great explanation. Today, when I was talking to her, or I should say, when I was talking to her in college, she said, "Daddy, I got straight A's in math." And I said, "Catherine, how'd you do that?" She said, "Well, Daddy, I am a genius." Now I thought she was being funny with me because I told her that when she was 11. And I go, "Oh, so you remember?" I said she didn't remember me telling her that. But I programmed her mind to say I'm a genius, but also behind that, I put in the structure to support the idea that she's a genius. And this idea of being a genius was also followed up with, I can do anything I put my mind to. Is that helpful for you, Naveen?
It is. It's like a quick crash course in how to build a growth mindset in kids. So thank you for that. Talking about people, or don't want to compare employees to kids, but talking about people, hiring the right people remains one of the biggest challenge for leaders. And I came across SWAN formula for hiring that you talk about a lot as well. So can you explain what it is and how it helps organization in building better teams?
Sure. The SWAN formula is something I learned years ago, and hiring the right people can either make or break your organization. It's a very costly endeavor if you hire the wrong person, and especially if you hire the wrong person who either doesn't fit culturally or isn't doing the job. They're going to bring everybody else down. So let's get that on the table. The second thing is that, and this is probably going too far in depth. The thing that I see in corporations, and this is to all CEOs or anybody else who's hiring people, you have to make sure that that job description looks and says exactly what the job is. Because what I often find out is that HR organizations, I'm sorry, HR organizations, they have a template, and the template describes some general factors, but they only give like 4 lines to change, and they've got a laundry list of things that this person needs to do, when in reality it's only 4 or 5 things. And then they put at the end, the last bullet is any other duties that we assign to you that we see fit. Just in case we missed something out of the other 30 things that we listed bullets above. And people now are just getting glazed over by this long job description. Now, the problem is, when you interview people, you've got to interview people 3 times. And we're so busy. We don't have time to interview people 3 times. And I have a formula that's beyond SWAN. And just, you get, if the recruiter in your organization, if you found somebody, just schedule a 15-minute interview, because you want that person to be happy in the job that they're coming into. Does that make sense? You want them to be happy. And you ask the person, I'd say, Naveen, tell me about what you want, what you're looking for. Tell me what you want. What's your career goals? And I hear that, but that's my 15-minute, I want to hear them. And I'm going to say to them, I'm going to say, Naveen, I'm going to tell you something. You're bright, but this job that I have doesn't match what you're looking for. Now, I've saved 45 minutes because an hour-long interview. And by the way, you depart friends with me. I said, let's link in. But I want you to get the right job, because I don't want you 6 months from now, me not being happy with you and you're not being happy with me. So I do the 15-minute pre-screen. The second call I do is, let's sit down and go through what this is and and I describe the job in detail. And then I ask how they fit the job. And then we get a third interview and say, look, I want to make sure that you're the right fit. And I wound up saying to the person, what is your salary? What are you looking for? And I know what my range is. I don't play games. I wind up 95% of the time giving them more money than what they asked for. Now, that people might think I'm generous. I'm not generous, but I want them to be happy. If I find the right person, I don't want them ever second guessing. Now, let me come to the SWAN formula. You're looking for people who are smart people, and they ask a lot of questions in the interview. A lot of people don't ask questions, or they're afraid to. So it's smart people, and smart people always ask a lot of questions. They want to make sure the job's right for them. And so interviewers, you can't get defensive when they ask you questions you can't answer. By the way, interviewers are not professional interviewers. They're managers of professional managers. And they have this little thing that they got to do called interviewing. So smart people. The next one is they work hard. They're ambitious. They want to make sure that there's something beyond this job that they can aim for. So they want a runway. They want to know they can grow and develop. And so you're looking for somebody who has those competencies that they're growing into. And I hit the A word. They're ambitious type people. So you got work hard, ambitious people. And then the last one is nice. I cannot train nice people. I can't train for being nice. I don't have that kind of time, because it usually is how you're raised or where you grew up. And if you really have a mental philosophy of being kind and nice to others. So the SWAN formula is smart, work hard, ambitious, and nice people. And that's got to be at least most of the things that you're looking for in a framework.
Love that, especially the ambitious and nice part. I've been into many interviews where the interviewer didn't care too much or didn't ask about ambitions. And in some instances where people asked about ambition and you talk about, for example, I am a head of engineering and AI at the moment. If I say my ambition is to, in 3 years time, I want to become a CTO. Sometimes sharing ambition kind of scares people away as well, that this person is not going to stay in the organization, in the business for long because they're ambitious.
Yes. And I think that's a great point. So let me address this for the people in your audience that are going to watch this and listen to this. You got to be real careful with telling people your goals for that specific reason. You can't expect everybody to understand that it's okay to have ambitions, and that fear that you're going to leave them is going to be a black mark against you. So I've been studying goal setting for the past 30 years as well. And, some of the earlier books 30 years ago said, tell other people your goals. This way they can hold you accountable. You don't need anybody to hold you accountable. Those goals should be secret to you and to maybe a loved one or a coach, but to share them openly with other people because they're going to be, number one, either jealous, they're going to not understand, or they're just, they're going to say, this doesn't help me. And it's going to be one of those three things. And so your interviewer if you're interviewing for a job, I'm not saying be deceitful. It's okay to have goals, but you got to be careful who you explain those to, because if you're interested in the job, that person wants you to work at that job and you want to do a good job. You want to do such a good job and you want to eventually be promoted and prove yourself while you're in that job, that it's just a natural course that you will get promoted to become CTO. Does that make sense? Is that helpful?
It does, and I think it is good that you kind of elaborated on that because it's really important for people listening and maybe taking advice on SWAN that it's good to have ambitions, but sometimes sharing your ambition can scare away the interviewer, which happened with
Now,
me
no,
a
now
lot
don't
of
forget.
times.
Yeah, don't forget SWAN. We want to see two sides. You've got the interviewer, the person who's doing the interviewing, and then you got the interviewee, the candidate. The interviewer is looking for SWAN. The candidate has a whole different formula to look for. He or she needs to match the job description as to what needs to be accomplished. So that interviewer or candidate needs to ask questions like, I have the job description in front of me. There are 30 things on here. I think there's top 5, but can you confirm what the top 5 are? And this way I can tell you about my skill sets relevant to those top 5 that are important to you. So now you're asking a question and you're framing the discussion and you have more control over the entire discussion. Is that helpful?
Yeah, it is definitely. We kind of touched upon the culture in directly or indirectly. So let's talk about the importance of culture a little bit. So how
Yes.
can leaders create a high engagement culture, which I know is another topic that you talk about a lot. And why
Yes.
why is it critical for organizational success?
Yeah. So this may get, again, as you can tell, I've been in the corporate world. I've been studying this information. So I'm not trying to give like surface answers.
Yeah.
I'm giving depth.
Mhm.
I want your audience to understand the depth behind a lot of these things. So the culture of an organization is the environment in which people behave. I want to just put it as simply as, what are the things that we value and how do we behave and act within this organization? And most organizations have a framework of the same aspirational things or values that they're looking or striving for. They're not much different. They may use different words. The critical thing to know is in a culture that leaders at all levels reinforce those values from the top all the way down. So that framework in creating leaders at all levels is about making sure that framework or values are consistently lived by each person. And if it's just talk or it's just a plastic thing we put on the wall and we don't go back to it and don't live it, then there's really no values and it's an empty culture. Somebody spent a lot of money with McKinsey or some other big firm to put a set of values together that people aren't living by. But it should drive how we behave, and it should drive many of the processes at work, because processes are just a way of doing things, but they should be shown how this goes back to our culture. Now, leaders at all levels, I believe, fits into every framework of a culture, because you're trying to make sure that everybody feels empowered and getting everybody engaged in driving the result needed for the team that ties into the division, that ties into the corporation or to the company or entire organization. So right down to the person who's doing the work, they need to feel not only empowered, but they need to be engaged. Now, I've done a lot of work in terms of looking at engagement rates. And apparently, 1 out of every 3 people are engaged. The other 66% are not engaged. Managers are, this is probably not going to sound good. There's two types of people I always find. There's right brain people, left brain people. Left brain people typically are your engineering, operational type people. Right brain people are more of your sales, creative type people. Your left brain people need to be more right brain or more people centric. Your left brain people tend to focus on tasks and don't want to get involved with people. Your right brain people don't like tasks. They tend to get involved with people. Your left brain people are Excel spreadsheet people or programmers. And again, I'm generalizing. Your right brain people are typically salespeople, agency people, creative people. And if there's a blending of the two, what Gallup found out, or Gallup points to, is the critical factor to getting people engaged is the direct manager. It's not the CEO. It's not the executive vice president. It's the direct manager. And the direct manager can do some simple things. I've got a couple of simple things a direct manager can do to engage people. On their one-on-ones with people, ask the people to put the agenda together and email it to you the day before, and let the people run the agenda. And it should, their agenda of one-on-ones should look like this. Tell me what you're working on. Tell me how that what you're working on is applying to the results. Tell me the support you need and what the gap is between where you are and where you need to be, and any kind of support that you need from me. And it's a one-on-one. It shouldn't take an hour. I talked to one manager. She called me, and she was one of my clients. I talk to a lot of people. My facilitated sessions that I do, they're 90 minutes long. I have 150 people, 200 people, depending on the size of the organization. And they come in and they learn something pertaining to leadership. One woman emailed me and said, "Can I take some of your time?" And I got a question. And I do. I take the time. I don't charge for that kind of thing. One woman to me said, I have 17 people, and I have one-on-ones with each one of them a day. Excuse me, each one of them each week. I said, that's 17 hours. She said, well, some of those meetings go longer than an hour. And I asked her how she created the agenda. And she told me the agenda. I said, you're duplicating work. Their job shouldn't be changing that much from week to week. And I said, but now you're wasting their time and your time, but it's feel good stuff. And you're winding up 60 hours a week or 70 hours a week, and you're crushed, and you're not getting your job done for your manager. I said, push the meeting back, make it 15 minutes. She said, 15 minutes? I said, yeah. Do it once every 2 weeks. She said, well, how am I going to do that? I said, you make them do the agenda, and then they send it to you. And you're going to be surprised. The 3 or 4 items that they have on the list, they've all taken care of it. It's just an FYI kind of thing. That's what it typically turns into. So she was so shocked. She came back to me like a month later. She said, you will not believe how much more time I have. I'm freed I am. And oh, by the way, my people told me they prefer it that much too. And she said that some of her people told her they were making stuff up just to do and have the meeting, and they wound up talking about just niceties. How's your son doing in baseball? How's this going? No. And she was much more or less stressed. Let me come back to the one-on-ones. Mm-hmm. Let them run it. Yeah. And you're giving them in power, and they're taking ownership for what they do, because now they're telling you what's going on as a manager. And when they're telling you and they're talking and you're listening, you don't have to do very much except listen. And they feel good about what they're doing. It's the most amazing thing. So that's number one. Number two is when you pay attention to people and you ask them in those meetings, or if they come by, just asking them how their day is going, and just sitting on the sidelines and listening is probably the most empowering thing a manager can do. But it's taking that time, getting away from that spreadsheet or that programming, and getting up from behind your desk. And that's number three. Getting up from behind your desk, and there's something called UMBA. It came from Tom Peters back in the 80s, management by walking around. That's still available. Now, in a Zoom world today, management by walking around is pinging somebody in the chat saying, hey, I just want to check in with you. How's it going? Or, hey, do you have a minute for a phone call? But put right behind that, you have a minute for a phone call? Don't worry. I just want to see how you're doing. I want to talk to you. Because if they say, hey, do you have a minute for a phone call? Everybody immediately goes into fear. Yeah. David Rock is a neuroscientist, and he points out in his studies that we have fear thoughts every second. We have 5 fear thoughts every second. We come from this mentality: is this going to be something good? Actually, it's not fear, it's a threat. Is this going to be good, or is this going to be bad for me? 5 times a second. And that's an amazing factor. So you want to relieve that fear. So this is how you engage people. So your engagement rate goes up. And when people's engagement rate goes up, they stay longer. But they not only stay longer, their productivity increases. They feel like they own the place. Remember the picture?
Yeah.
They start taking the picture and they straighten it out. Is this helpful for you and for your audience?
Extremely, I think. And you kind of reminded me of few terms that I wasn't planning to bring up, but quiet quitting. When you talked about low engagement, so quiet quitting the term became very famous during COVID time. And then the second thing around when you were talking about one-to-one and letting people on the agenda for one-to-one and things like that, I think a term like managing up is important in that context. So you as a manager or a leader kind of be comfortable being managed up as well.
Yes.
Or at least encourage your team members to manage up. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah. Well, I used to think managing up was political. Is how do I get the manager to like me? Because that's the frame where I came from, 20 years ago. I said, oh, I don't want to manage up. But it's actually good. I tell people on my calls, and I have people range on these calls that I have with my clients. I have anywhere, like I told you, anywhere to up to 150, 200 people on a call. But they're first-time managers and also vice presidents. And what the benefit there is, and a lot of people don't understand this, well, why don't you just have a call for just first-time managers? Well, there are, but what really benefits the people who are first-time managers are hearing from vice presidents who are having this discussion, because it's a facilitated session, and I can talk about that in a minute. But it's a facilitated session. They get to hear what the managers, the vice presidents, prefer, but also the vice presidents get to hear some of the issues and challenges of how their managers or other managers are thinking. And so they can extrapolate and go, I wonder if my managers are thinking this way too. So what this does, it reinforces the culture of openness and sharing and taking responsibility and getting things done. Now, this whole idea behind making sure that the right things are getting done starts with, and I tell people this in my classes, that if you got a long to-do list, it's incumbent upon you to take your to-do list to your manager and say, can you sit down with me for 10 minutes? I've got 30 things on here. I'm trying to get them all done this week, and you just gave me 4 more things. Can you tell me where these 4 things fall on the other 26 things that I have to get done? And what that does, it opens up a communication dialogue where the vice president or the manager goes, I didn't know you were doing these. And she starts crossing them off. Don't do this. That should be done by John. Why isn't John doing this? And all of a sudden now you're creating that connection. You're getting what we call alignment with your manager. Now that's managing up, but it's also allowing your manager to see what you're working on. It's not tooting your own horn. It's like, oh, wow, I didn't know you were doing all these things. Because managers, vice presidents, directors are all busy. And now you get the opportunity to get alignment. That's one of the most critical things you can do. The other thing is when you get an assignment, manager says, I need for you to get this done. You ask him 4 questions. Is it 4 questions? 4 questions. When do you need to have it done by? What does it need to look like? What tool do you want to put it in? Is it PowerPoint, Word, Excel? How do you want me to communicate? And then 4th, what are the milestones where where I need to check back in with you, or is there a call that we can have so that I can show you where I am? So I don't spend 60 hours of doing something and then at the end I bring it to my manager and my manager goes, that's not what I was looking for. And say, look, and I'm looking, so that one of the third one is, do you have a framework or something that I can look at? Or a second one, do you have a framework or something that I could look at that if you want this done, show me what worked for you in the past. And so this way I can model it after that. And now you're in sync with your manager. So many people walk away with, my boss told me to get this done. So then they wind up doing everything to move it and get it done, to do it fast, because being fast is important, you know? They get it done the next day and they go, oh, I didn't need to have this done that quickly. I just needed to have it done next week. Meanwhile, you dropped everything else off your plate. So it starts with, when do you need to have this done by?
You reminded me
Does that
of
help?
it is. You reminded me of a few more terms. I'll just mention the term and then maybe move on to the next question. Otherwise,
All right.
we'll be here for like a few hours. So one is being concise, the importance of being concise, and extreme clarity.
Yeah, it comes back to culture and values and alignment. And when I can remember when I first became a manager, and I would be talking past people. And then when the more we wound up collaborating and working together, we followed a framework, a structure. So for example, in order to win business, we followed a process of how to win business. And once we had the framework in everybody's mind and all our sales team, I could ask a simple question as to, who are the buyers, for example. And they knew what I meant by buyers. Buyers in this particular case, because I followed strategic selling by Miller Hyman, buyers means stakeholders. Who are the people who are the decision makers and what are their roles? Do we understand? So I say, do we understand who the buyers are? They go, yeah, it's so and so, so and so. Who's got the final decision making authority? They knew right away. So what wound up happening, we had the framework. And after a while, what would happen is I'd see somebody in the hallway and I go, hey, Mike, about the XYZ opportunity. Mike would go, I've already spoken to the buyers. I've got their decision criteria. I've also understand that we've got a demonstration and presentation lined up, and I'm going to ask you to come in to meet with the CEO the following week after the demonstration. And he nailed all the questions before I even asked. So you talk about being concise. I'd say, hey, Mike, about the XYZ. And so all of a sudden he had those 4 things. So it starts with the values and also training your people from a framework discussion. It's also teaching your people. Remember I talked about left brain, right brain type people?
Yeah.
If I'm a right brain person, I have to be more concise and adapt my skills to the left brain person who wants, and I show this in my class. This is another class that I teach, how to be not only concise, but also be deliberate to get the results, to communicate from what's in your head into their head, and from their head into your head, because we always don't communicate well.
Yep.
And so there's a number of different things. One is understanding how that left brain person thinks, and understanding saying too much from the right brain standpoint, because us right brain people like to talk, because that's where we formulate solutions when we're talking. The left brain person likes to digest it. They like to go away. Mm-hmm. And they don't want to talk because they're not sure what they're thinking yet. So they need more time to digest it. Doesn't mean that the right brain person is smarter. It just means they process differently or process faster. And that doesn't mean that they're processed correctly either, where the left brain people want to be more precise. Left brain is logic. Just for your audience, left brain is logic. It's using the logic side of your hemisphere, and there are 2 sides, and the right brain's your creative side. Just making sure you're understanding who you're talking to, and you start using their own language as well. So if they're visual, you're using visual language. The person says, I don't see what you mean. So let me see if I can draw a picture for you or paint a picture. So now you're using visual words. And there's kinesthetic words, which is feeling. This doesn't feel good.
Yeah.
And then there's auditory words. So you want to make sure you're using the same words to communicate these things between each other. And the last part is you want to be able to ask questions. Questions are so critical to success at work and also with clients that if you're asking the wrong questions or you're not asking questions, you're not getting the full impact of what they want or how they're feeling or understanding their description, because the English language or any language is just so fraught with different holes that my meaning for we need to get on the same page can sound like we're off on the same page rather than I just want to sync up. So it can be just little nuances. I was talking to somebody who is an interpreter,
Mhm.
and she said in the English language, and in English language, she said, we need to bake that into the solution. She said, well, that does not translate. There's like, where are we cooking? You know, we need to have a cook that can create that in her language. And so it doesn't translate. So, you know, we have all these different shortcuts and different words to make sure that we're saying the same things.
Again, so many follow-up questions, but I'm gonna uh, stick to the couple of last questions that I had for you. By the way, when you were talking about left brain and right brain, that reminded me of the book called Thinking Fast and Slow, with System One thinking and System Two thinking. So probably a
Yes.
good book for the audience to kind of read, so that what Joe is talking about would make a lot more sense.
Yeah.
Couple of last questions, Joe. Things are moving pretty fast, especially because of the AI at the moment, and I think every role will change in one way or another. So, how do you envision leadership specifically evolving over the next few years?
You know, I wish I could give a really precise answer where I could predict the future.
Yeah.
You know, the AI, I'm looking at some of the videos just like everybody else, especially with robotics. And there's a gentleman that I follow on LinkedIn. His name is Agrasso, and his information. He's Italian. He wrote a number of articles on AI and how it's going to apply to the marketplace, to business. And one of the things that I pulled out of that, some other research I was doing, somebody said there were 97 million jobs are going to be lost because of AI. But then they did the other side. There's going to be 150 million jobs created because of AI. I don't know if that's all true because that's predicting the future.
Yeah.
But it is going to replace a lot of, I think, lower level task jobs, which is going to force all of us into this growth mindset aspect and learning and developing. So this is something around leadership in terms of making sure that your people have a growth plan and they follow the growth plan as part of the strategy of your organization. So we talked about culture. We didn't talk about strategy. Strategy for where the organization is heading needs to have some sort of an AI plan. But HR and also the business people need to look at how that's going to impact your current people, because people are fearful that they're not going to have jobs to make that change. I'll give you an example. There's a lot of call centers out there.
Mm-hmm.
4 years ago, I went to a seminar, and a lot of the universities were already using AI, and they could, through voice identification, know that it's Joe Murphy. Oh, Joe, glad to hear you again. We just talked on Tuesday last week. What seems to be the issue? Or we talked on Tuesday last week. I'm glad you made it here for your appointment. I told you that you need to go to the registrar's office to get and sign up for this class. Did you? And I see you did that. Now I want to commend you for doing it. Now, this is a computer talking, and it has a voice just like a human. Now, this is 4 years ago, and they know, and it's already there. And so now you've replaced a counselor, and this machine or the robot is telling you what to go do next and giving you coaching, so that if you're having some fears also, well, that's a natural thing to have, Joe. You got a fear because you're not sure if you can do the class. Now, let's put together a plan that's going to work for you so that you're studying the right curriculum. And the robot knows exactly what the curriculum looks like and helps create a plan. And this dialogue is going back and forth. That was 4 years ago. I explained to the company I was with, I said, this is going to change everything. This is going to change everything people do. And that was just call centers. Now you're looking at also where a robot can go to the grocery store and go grocery shopping, or a robot will come to your house and drop off the food. And Amazon's already looking at that, for example, robotics, obviously. So what's going to happen is, where I'm seeing it is, how are you, the robotics is going to need managers to manage the robots and manage the robotics to make sure that these things continue to work for us and help enable us and support us as human beings. Now, again, that is, about this much of what I know. But I think there are opportunities out there, and this is for your audience. There are opportunities out there as you learn more about these things to look at where the industry is going. And leadership is not going to fall away. We're still going to be leading people, but they're going to be doing different things.
I thought you were going to say, but we will be leading at all levels, which is going to be true. Just kind of add to what you just said. I was watching a keynote by NVIDIA CEO Jensen, I think. He was releasing some AI agent technology a couple of weeks ago or last week. He said that he predicted that all IT departments will become AI agent HR departments. So there will be AI agents doing things and work, and IT departments are like HR departments for AI agent. So something to kind of think about, and I'll drop the link to that NVIDIA keynote in the description as well. Last question. Reflecting on your more than 30 years of experience, any specific parting wisdom that you want to share about on leadership?
Yes, I think the biggest thing is remember leadership is about getting results, and I mentioned that earlier. That gets overlooked each time. Remember that leadership is about working with people. It's not something you do to people. So think of yourself walking side by side with your people. Instead of being over, be side by side. I literally used to get from behind my desk when somebody came into the office and sat on the same side of the desk. You don't want the desk to be a barrier. And that's the same thing even with a conference table or with clients. People are people. Be kind. You can never be too kind to people. People are carrying a heavy load. And I talk to young managers and say, well, this person keeps on coming in late. Did you ever stop to ask them what's going on that they're coming in late? One of my turnarounds that I did, there was a small project, and I did large divisions, but also small projects as well. I asked the person, I said, we start at 8:00. How come you're coming in late? Well, my mother passed away who was watching my child. And so now I've got to walk the child to the school bus. And the manager of that department wanted to fire her. And I said, why don't we do this? Why don't we accommodate her schedule? Well, that would mean we'd accommodate everybody's schedule. I said, allow her to come in at 8:15 instead of 8. And they said, well, we can't do that. It's against policy. I said, there's not a policy per se. We need to make it fair. So let's bring it to all the other people who work with her. What happened was we went to the other people, told the situation, said, can you pick up her work for that 15 minutes? And every one of them said, absolutely. And by the way, I said, if the same thing happens to you or something similar, we will do the same thing for you and give you the grace until somebody to be able to walk her child to the school bus. So just remember, being kind is key. Does that helpful? And then last,
yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say it is. And it reminds me of a very important quality a leader should have is empathy.
Empathy, yes. See what's going on. We're all human. We're doing the best we can with the knowledge we have of the world. Make sure that you're working with people to help increase that knowledge. I'm a big believer in the classes that I do and give. And as leaders, take lunch, buy lunch for your people, bring them into the conference room if you have an office, and teach them things. Or ask your people to teach others what they do really well. And now you're creating this environment, give and take, and you're starting to create a learning environment where, in a way, you're forcing learning by creating that environment or that time at lunch, and you bring in lunch where people are learning. That changed a lot of the things in the organizations that I turned around, because we used to have a Friday lunch and learn kind of thing, and people would bring in topics that they wanted to learn. We had people. I didn't teach the classes all the time. I did teach some, but the people started teaching it, and they became empowered. The last thing is know that management is different than leadership. You can have a leader at all levels, and I define leadership this way. It's my definition. Leadership is a set of behaviors that inspires others to become their best selves and to perform at the top of their ability on the way to an objective. That means that anybody can be a leader and anybody can develop leadership qualities, because what you're doing is you're inspiring others by modeling behavior that inspires others to perform at their best. And management is different. You manage things, you lead people, if that makes sense. And again, I break it down to left brain, right brain. Manage things like Excel spreadsheets,
Yeah.
the number of cars in the parking lot, and you lead people. Two different skills, two different ways of action. And by the way, you can be a manager with leadership skills, and you can be a leader with management skills. And those typically are the people who rise to the top.
On that note, Joe, it has been a great conversation, and I'm sure your insights will bring a lot of value to our listeners. So thank you so much
Well,
for.
thank you very much. Well, I've enjoyed this. Thank you very much. As you can tell, I'm very passionate about what I do. I love what I do. And if I can ever help you or any of your listeners, don't hesitate to ask me, and you'll
Yeah,
find me on LinkedIn.
yeah. I was going to ask, why don't you just tell people where can they find you, especially if they would like to kind of leverage your expertise.
I can be reached at joe@josephbmurphy.com. And, I think you've got my email address. You can put that in there as well. And I have a website. It's called, it's Cross Current. It's CROSS with an X in the middle, and then current, CURRENT. And it's Cross Current with the X. And my website is also called, it's two websites into one, Joseph B. Murphy. I'm also on LinkedIn as Joe Murphy. You'll see me posting leadership information on a daily basis. I also have over 200 videos on LinkedIn. They're about 3 to 5 minutes, 6 minutes a clip, and they're free for anybody to download and use. I also have those same videos, or a majority of those same videos, out on YouTube now. I have about 170 videos on YouTube. So I appreciate that. And if anybody wants to use them, again, free of charge. And I have 6 books published now.
Oh yeah, we didn't get to talk about book. Please tell us about your latest book.
My latest book is called, you'll see, if you go to my LinkedIn, you'll see I'm starting to talk about it. It's called Tapping Your Infinite Potential. And it's a question and answer type guide. I'll put it here, where I ask a question. And what I did years ago, because just like everybody, I had certain fears and wanted to learn more about psychology, I started writing out questions and looking at the psychological answer, because I think from my standpoint, I teach leadership, but I do it from 2 ways. One, I've got the experience and I explain everything that I've done wrong. And I've done a lot of things wrong. And so my studies have taught me how to become a better leader. And I applied what I learned. This is very important. When you learn something, you need to apply it. And I didn't know it at the time, but I was starting to apply it and I made mistakes. And now I started to adapt and adjust what I was doing in the environment with some of the leadership things I was picking up, and adapted it to my personality and my environment and the situation. And again, they didn't always work, but I learned from it. And that's one of the critical things. So as I started to mature in leadership and understanding what leadership is, I started to understand people better and what made them tick. So I started studying psychology. And so this is a culmination of leadership and business, and how I can reprogram myself so that I overcome fears and intrepidations about growth mindset, learning things, and tapping into my potential. So anyway, it's about 228 pages. There's over 1,000 question and answers in here. And so that just was released actually today,
So
as we speak.
awesome. I'll add the link to the book in the description as well. So once again,
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joe. It's great to have you on the podcast.
Thank you very much, and have a great rest of your day.
You too. Goodbye, everyone.